Erosion and deposition, how weathering bits get moving. Here's an example of erosion and deposition. Do you think these people built this house there? This is the definition of erosion, which is an active process of removing soil and rocks and dissolved materials from one place to another. In this image, you can see that on the left-hand side is weathering, which is how rocks break down. But on the right-hand side is the difference. Erosion is moving those broken bits downhill to another place. There are two main players in erosion. Gravity is the primary force. It causes everything to move downhill. Um, most of erosive processes are caused by the actions of water, liquid water, ice, and snow. And the other erosive processes could be wind, plants, animals, and humans. Let's overview the main players. Liquid water is highly erosive. The first image here is river erosion, high in the mountains, and you can see that there are some really big rocks left up here. The next picture, you would have a river and stream erosion. This is lower on the mountainside, maybe in a valley, and you can tell that because there are smaller rocks. You've got some sand, mud, and the bank on the side is eroding. And then the third image you're going to see is a delta, where a mountain stream that's quite steep is entering into another body of water. This causes the sediments to drop out and pile up at the bottom. Eventually, this sediment will be moved downstream. Snow is the beginning of glaciers, either on continents or on mountain tops. So lots of snow falls on these places, and over time they get compacted, and over that time they get compacted into ice, and then that mass will begin to shift and move. Like I said earlier, everything moves downhill. And along the way, it's going to ground up bits of the rock and the material and the sediment. It's going to take it down with it along its path. And then that forms kind of a sheet of icy, rocky sandpaper that causes all these different shapes we see as glacial valleys. In the next few images, you should notice that the glaciers are not white. They actually have these dark striped bands, or in the next one, you'll see it's really covered with a lot of brown debris. Well, that's the sediment load that glaciers carry as they move down the mountain. As a matter of fact, if you're looking at the foot of a glacier, sometimes you don't recognize it because it looks just like the rocks all around it. Now, weathering by ice you are familiar with in the term we used last time called ice wedging, which is this first rock, really big boulder. But you notice too that it also causes, once that ice breaks it off, then gravity takes over and starts dropping these rocks all around the bigger rock, the parent rock. Another type of erosion that occurs through ice is also called frost wedging, and a picture you're looking at now has little bits of soil. So this is water that is under the ground, and as the ground froze, the ice expanded and it uplifted these pebbles and other sand bits on top of it like little pedestals. And so this also helps with erosion in that it forces the soil apart, makes it available when the water then melts to move it along. Wind is a highly erosive process or substance. Moving air will move sediments across the ground and in the air, and quite erosive. We'll see in some other images further on in the presentation. So not as connected to gravity, but the larger particles obviously are going to stay put, whereas smaller particles are going to be able to move better. On this first image, you can see that there are bigger pebbles and there are sand. And if you look closely, you can actually tell from which direction the wind had blown prior to this picture being taken. So if you were to guess, which way is it blowing? Would it be blowing from right to left or left to right? If you said from right to left, you are correct. And here is how you would know. So you have the pebble on the right, and just directly behind it, you have a little hill. And that little hill, or that line that you see, is actually a little hill of the sand sediments that are being blocked by the wind that's coming from the right side and allowing the sand behind, directly behind the pebble, to stay put. It's protected. It's being blocked by the other pebble. In this image, you see a formation of sandstone that has been, one, deposited by an ancient stream, two, lifted up because all sediments are deposited relatively flat, and three, carved up by wind and water erosion. And finally, we have a dust storm. Depending on the wind speed, these sediments can be carried for miles, and these sediments can be the size of sand grains. These are desert sands from the Sahara of Africa that cross the Atlantic Ocean and deposit soil and sediment on North America and South American continents. They can be responsible for changing weather patterns due to blocking out the sunlight from the atmosphere, as these are high atmosphere erosive events. These all should be pretty familiar to you, as should these, the human impacts.